Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today we'll be taking a look at the current Top 5 compositions for patch 1120. Even though patch 1120 is a bit more fun since we're nearing the end of set 5, there's still plenty of top tier meta compositions to choose from. Given the patch didn't focus too much on balance, not a lot has changed in the meta, so expect to see a lot of familiar comps in the top 5. All that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 5, we have Draven Legionnaire coming in as the number 5 composition. An alternative name for this comp would be Knight Legionnaire, as the board usually runs 4 Knight and 4 Legionnaire. Forgotten is also a viable option, but it's not essential for Draven to do well. The best time to run the Forgotten variation is when you hit an early Draven 2 and already have a bunch of Forgotten units. This allows you to transition towards a capped late game board with things like Viego 2. But the more common variation is the Knight Legionnaire version. Draven was doing decently well in the first week of 1119, but quickly fell off as players realized Draven was not quite up to par with the other carries. In 1120, they buffed his base damage by 5. While this may sound like an inconsequential buff, it has helped push Draven back up the carry totem pole. By no means is he the absolute best AD carry, but having slightly more base attack damage helps shore up the issues he had of not dealing enough damage. As for the composition itself, well, it's simply 4 Knights with one of them being Thresh and 4 Legionnaire with one of them being Draven. Not too difficult to put together, and there's a good amount of flexibility. Dropping 2 Knights means that you can run 6 Legionnaire or 4 Forgotten. There's also Ironclad available with Nautilus or Mystic if you need it in the lobby. The star of the board is Draven, so focus on itemizing him. Rageblade is flexible across multiple carries, so it's a common item for Draven. Deathblade, Infinity Edge, and Giant Slayer are the trifecta of standard AD items, and Bloodthirster helps keep Draven alive throughout the fight. Additional items for the board to look for include Banshee's Claw, Zeke's, and frontline items. In variations that use Diana, Frozen Heart is by far the best item for her. All in all, Draven is on the weaker side compared to other AD carries, but the amount of buffs and changes he's received in recent patches is enough to earn him a spot in our top 5. Let's move on to the composition coming in at number 4, Vel'Koz Abomination. There is some debate as to whether Vel'Koz is capable of carrying or not in the current meta, but looking at streams, match histories, and playing games, it's clear that the squid is still going strong. Sure, there are weaknesses, but on average a Vel'Koz composition should be able to top 4. The main reason for this is the composition itself, but also because Vel'Koz can dish out a lot of damage. Major criticism for Vel'Koz is that improper positioning is a death sentence. If one player is able to always position well against the Vel'Koz player, theoretically, they should win against the board most of the time. This is definitely a major weakness for Vel'Koz, so we don't recommend playing this composition if you're not going to sweat constantly with scouting and positioning. And while positioning is extremely important, as long as your board is upgraded and you have other sources of damage, it's fine to sometimes be on the wrong side as the Vel'Koz player. That leads us to the board itself, which is generally Abomination plus Vel'Koz. There are other viable options like Redeem, but the most common is almost always Abomination. Fiddlesticks, Nunu, and Brand make up the core for Abomination, with Callista floating in the distance as a trait bot. Then you toss in Vel'Koz, which unlocks 2 Spellweaver. From there, it's all about what you manage to hit, whether that's additional Revenants with Ivern and Volibear, or Invoker champions like Teemo and Syndra. Spellweaver is a big source of damage for Vel'Koz, especially since Brand pairs so well with the unlimited stacking of the trait. By the time Vel'Koz casts twice, his AP should be high enough to wipe the rest of the board. So it comes down to the items you have, how strong your board is, and positioning to effectively utilize Vel'Koz. Shojin is important to help Vel'Koz cast quickly, and any AP damage items are usable for the other 2 slots. Gunblade is also an option, as is Hand of Justice, to provide healing for Vel'Koz. Spellweaver Emblem is also insanely good with this comp, generally being given to Fiddlesticks and a 4th Spellweaver added in at level 8. Overall, the value of Vel'Koz mostly relies on how well your early and mid game go by hitting early Abomination and having a good front line. Having the health and economy to play for Vel'Koz 2 and a bunch of expensive champions like Volibear or Teemo is just as important to doing well with the Laser Squid as positioning is. Moving on to the number 3 composition, we have Rangers. There are a lot of variations that are viable with Rangers. To simplify this, we're going to focus on Aphelios and Akshan as the 2 primary carries. To give an idea of what else is viable, there's also Ashe 3, Vayne 3, and in rare cases, Varus 3. Those are all reroll compositions with vastly different boards than Aphelios and Akshan, so it'll be simpler to focus on just those 2 champions. It's worth noting that an Aphelios board has crazy high potential to do well in the late game, but getting there is difficult. This is due to the cost of the champions. At level 8, a standard Aphelios board is Aphelios 2, Akshan, Teemo, Volibear, Fiddlesticks, Ivern, Diana, and either Gwen or Lulu. That makes the majority of the board 4 and 5 cost champions. Of course, there are less expensive variations like 4 or 6 Nightbringer and 4 Ranger, but the best cap board for Aphelios is heavily late game focused. Items are also key for Aphelios, with the best being Rageblade, some type of AD item, and a utility item. Of those, Rageblade is the most important as it helps ramp up Aphelios during the round. Everything else is flexible, though you definitely need damage items, otherwise Aphelios won't be nearly as effective. If Akshan is your carry, Rageblade is alright, but not necessary. Primarily, you want damage items, but also Bloodthirster to heal Akshan when he spins, and Runin's Hurricane to do damage while he's spinning. Keep in mind that even though Ranger boards with Aphelios or Akshan carry are expensive, you don't have to force those boards right away. Open with Vayne or Varus and play a less expensive board to ease into playing Aphelios. As you said, Nightbringer is a much less expensive alternative as well. Even though it won't be as effective late game, it at least buys you time to stabilize and reach level 8. Much like any composition, improving your early game is the best way to transition into the late game focused Aphelios Akshan Ranger composition. Or you can forego that entirely and hit the reroll button for Vayne or Ashe. Up next, we have Lucian Sentinel as the number 2 composition. If there wasn't a specific synergy buff this patch, Lucian and Sentinel would likely still be the number 1 composition. Even though Sentinel did get a tiny bit nerfed, it's still one of the best, if not the best, vertical traits in the meta. And Lucian 1 was unchanged, so stabilizing at level 7 with 1 Lucian and 6 Sentinel is by far the easiest way to play stage 4. So not a lot has really changed in regards to the value of Lucian Sentinel, and if you're the type of player wanting to climb ranked, then this is the composition we recommend for you. It's simple to run. Just pick up Lucian, Senna, Galio, and 3 other Sentinels. Toss in any extra synergies you may need like Ironclad, Mystic, or more Knights, and then you're good to go. Items are quite flexible as well, though AD items on Lucian are still ideal. Galio is still the best tank in the game, so be sure to have a few defensive items for him. It's worth noting that Lucian Sentinel won't quite hit the same heights as other late game compositions. Aphelios Rangers is overall a stronger capped board, as are a lot of the AP boards that run Heimerdinger. But the value of Lucian is in the mid game to stabilize for an easier level 8, making it possible to reach level 9 more often than a lot of other comps. Doing that should be enough to secure a top 2 placement, with Lucian 3 being the main win condition. And finally, our number 1 composition for patch 1120 is Draconic. If you read the patch notes, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Draconic received multiple changes in the patch that increased the chances of high rolling with the eggs. What that has done is created a meta where a minimum 2 or 3 players every game are forcing a Draconic board, whether that's with Ashe carry or Heimerdinger. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we do need to put out a small PSA for Draconic. Even though we've put it as the number 1 composition, it is not the best composition. The best compositions are generally consistent and reliable. Draconic? Draconic is neither of those, as it's the most volatile synergy in the game. It's entirely possible to hit Draconic on 2-1 and still go bottom 4 because your luck just wasn't present in that game. The main reason it's the number 1 composition is just how prevalent it's become in the meta. Everyone is playing it, and there's enough variations of the composition that multiple players can do that. Oh, and it's also fun. The dopamine rush of a 5-turn egg popping and dropping 20 gold and 3 Heimerdingers is by far the most satisfying thing that you can do with any composition. And the theme of patch 1120 is all about fun, so of course we're going to have Draconic at the top. As for the composition itself, there's a lot of ways to play it. Ashe 3 with 4 Rangers is doing well, as is the traditional Draconic Abomination board that transitions into Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger is the best late game board, especially if you're able to find Teemo 2 and other 5-cost champions. It simply has the highest potential. How exactly you get to those boards relies a lot on luck, as the best way to play them is to have Draconic active as early as 2-1. Of course, you can play Draconic later than that stage, but we don't recommend doing so past stage 2. Overall, Draconic is likely to net you a win, just as likely as it is to bottom 4. That's the risk of playing Draconic, but at least it will be a fun journey. And that's it for our top 5 compositions of patch 1120. But before we go, we've got a few honorable mentions to talk about. Our first honorable mention is Hellion Reroll. Kled 3 really caused quite the stir last patch, especially at the Set 5's World Championship. Since then, they've nerfed both Hellions and Kled, so the composition has settled down in a much healthier place. It's still viable to run Kled carry as well as Ziggs or Tristana carry. The main downside is that you really have to high roll to do well with it, otherwise the best placement for it is still around a 4th or 5th. Certainly playable, but we mostly only recommend it for reroll enthusiasts. And the other honorable mention is Dawnbringer. Dawnbringer generally means Karma, but it can also mean Riven carry in rare cases. But primarily, it's going to be 6 Dawnbringers with Karma as the main damage dealer and Garen as the primary frontliner. Karma is certainly able to keep up with the majority of carries. The main issue is that she falls off towards the late game. Players can bypass this issue if they manage to find a Teemo 2, as Teemo is the perfect transition out of Karma into a late game capped board. Dawnbringer is also a fantastic early and mid game synergy, with both Riven and Nidalee being viable item holders for a plethora of AD carries. All, Dawnbringer would have easily been in our top 5 if Draconic hadn't swooped in and pushed everyone down a notch. And that's all for today, folks. The meta is quite interesting, as there's plenty of serious compositions like Lucian and Rangers, but the most common composition is Draconic. It definitely speaks to the fun nature of this patch as we're nearing the end of set 5, especially with set 6 coming out on the PvE next patch. Let us know in the comment section below which compositions you've been climbing with the most. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.